Oh, it's Bring It In Troops, little Zoom from quarantine show. Today we have, of course, David Thorpe and special guest, author of the new book, The Eye Test, award-winning journalist Chris Jones. Are you live from Canada, Chris?
I am, friends. I'm in Port Hope, Ontario, Canada, where it's chilly. But
how cold is it?
I don't know what in American degrees. It would be 30? 30 degrees? It's not too bad.
Yeah.
There's snow on the ground, but it's okay.
30 is a big win in your degrees, though, right? And
that's hot as balls.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah.
Chris, you're speaking to, well, I'm purely American. Henry's got some continental blood in him, but when you say Port Hope, Ontario, you assume we know where the hell that is.
No idea. Yeah.
We don't know anything in America geography-wise. Now, I've been to lots of places in Canada, but where exactly are, like, what's the nearest landmark?
I'm open to the idea it's made up entirely.
How close are you to where the Raptors play? That's probably where how close
I can get to the Raptors in an hour and 10 minutes.
Okay.
So with no traffic. So no, I'm definitely in Raptors country. I'm not in the 905, which is sort of the but I'm past that, but I'm have you seen the movie It?
Oh, hell no.
No.
That was gonna help us locate your home?
That's my town.
Oh, wow.
That's my town. So Port Hope is so small that when people go, oh, what's Port? I go, have you seen It? That's my town.
Why would anyone see that movie?
Because you want to see Chris's house. Yeah.
My house is briefly in it. I had that clown. No joke. That clown was wandering around town all summer. It was horrific.
That's not good for your property values.
It was not good for anything. He woke me up one night screaming. This is a totally true story. He was standing in the river in front of my house at 2 a.m. screaming. They were filming a scene, but with no notice. And he screamed all night long. Not AC/DC style, but like it was bad news.
So there's a menacing, murderous clown in this quote unquote movie that actually screams also?
Yeah. No, he's horrific. And he looked nightmarish, and
I'm sure
they were filming in the summer, and he would walk around with a parasol because the makeup was on.
Yeah,
and it just made it even worse. And occasionally in town, people will still tie a red balloon.
Oh my goodness!
To street gutters and stuff. It's really messed things up.
Those people are assholes.
Yeah. Crazy.
The best part was that my house at the time was scouted as a potential house for the director, who was this like very dark, like, I don't know how to explain him. You could just foreboding. The director just had this air of danger about him, and he thought my house was too creepy.
No, he did.
He literally did, and my house did have an appearance of being extremely haunted. But he was like, "No, it's too creepy. It's like too on the nose." I was like, "Holy smokes!
Whoa,
my house is too messed up." It's creepy, director. Yeah.
If we're gonna be best friends one day in the future, I'd like you to somehow book Po from Kung Fu Panda to wander around your streets. I will be there happily, hang at the Jones house.
All right, I'll do my best.
That's my speed.
Chris, you've had an incredible career. You've done a lot of interesting things, and so I wanted to introduce you properly. But your Twitter bio is idiot, storyteller, colonoscopy advocate. What the hell?
Colonoscopies. Get your colonoscopies.
Okay.
Really important, especially for people of a certain age. Yeah. No, I had. Well, where do I start? Do I start with the idiot?
Up to you, man.
I make a lot of mistakes. When I was younger, I would used to try to pretend they weren't mistakes, and now that I've reached the middle age, the delight of not caring anymore, I just embrace the fact that I just constantly do stupid stuff. And storyteller, I like to tell stories. I've been a writer for a long time, but also screenwrite and stuff like that. And colonoscopy advocate. I know a lot of people who just had colon issues who could have been saved if they'd gotten their pooper scoped, and it's actually a delightful experience. Men particularly get all kind of like, no, and it's like the drugs they give you.
Amazing. Yeah.
Oh, the best, and the best sleep of your life, and a little clean out. Feels good. You know, you do the rinse, and the day of my colonoscopy, I feel like I could run a marathon. I'm ready.
Well, but did you ever play 9 holes of golf? Is that what you did?
Oh, yeah.
9 holes of golf
course.
That's also part of your bio, right? 9-hole golf.
Well, I don't believe in playing 18 holes of golf. I believe golf is a pleasurable 2-hour 9-hole experience. And then do something else because
That's how I feel about NFL football. One half is about enough. I don't watch any of it, but if I did, I'd watch a half.
Oh, football's a terrible sport.
Yeah.
No, we're done with that. We're not. We're gonna close that down. It just takes a little while.
Yeah.
Okay, so you've written this book.
And by the way, can I say I know the least about basketball
Perfect.
of any person you've ever not just had on your podcast. 2005, by the way. That's been around. But have ever met in real life, I think, probably.
I'm excited about that. We've placed some like basketball logic traps in the show so that we can expose your idiocy just for our own amusement.
I will stumble right into them.
All right. So in this book, I'm going to read a little bit about it. Of course, there's a place for numbers in decision making. No baseball player should be judged by his jawline. But the analytics revolution sparked by Michael Lewis's Moneyball now threatens to replace one kind of absurdity with another. We have developed a blind faith in the machine, the way a driver overly reliant on his GPS might be led off the edge of a cliff. I feel like I want to ask you, like, show me on the bear where the data hurt you. Something like what happened, Chris? Why?
My God. I wish I had a bear right now. You know what happened for me is I started out, my first job in journalism was a baseball beat writer, late 90s, and I covered the Blue Jays. And I will say one of my skills as a person is just stumbling into a situation and going, hey, can you tell me what's going on? Because I don't know what's going on. And the Blue Jays at the time were managed by a guy named Jim Fregosi, who was like the epitome of old baseball guy. Smoked like a chimney and walked around with nothing on all the time, and just classic baseball dude. And Jim and I did not start out very friendly. And then finally I was like, I just want to learn. Like, I'm just asking questions because I'm trying to figure things out. And every Sunday when we were on the road, he would spend half an hour with me in the dugout just explaining something about baseball.
Oh, cool.
Fantastic. I wish I had them recorded. Like, it would have been the greatest. They were like plays. I remember one he did in Cleveland where he talked about the changeup. Like, he gave me like a half an hour lesson on the changeup and deception in baseball, and wonderful. So
he had pants on at that time in Cleveland?
He was dressed at that time.
Cool.
Yeah, I have a terrible Jim Fregosi story where anyway, we can probably get to that. And Ron Washington was another guy. You know, Ron Washington at the time just won a World Series, but he was a coach. He was a coach for the A's. And I remember asking him how to bunt. Now, bunting is not a thing we do anymore, but at the time, and he gave me this 45-minute, like, how to bunt, which was basically like get the ball in the grass and run like hell. I mean, that's basically bunting, but fantastic. Then Moneyball comes out and but threatens to erase all of this sort of what I felt was like beautiful institutional knowledge of guys like Jim Fregosi. And I was at Esquire when Moneyball came out. I'd moved to magazines and gave it a really positive review. Like, I thought it was a great book. I think the movie is fantastic. How they made that movie out of that book is incredible. Yeah, it's incredible. Yeah. But then it just, you could feel it just going, like any revolution. Like, it made some good changes at first, and then the power sort of shifted. And for me, there was a lot of collateral damage where a lot of sort of that knowledge was dismissed, experience was dismissed. Whether you played the game or not, you know, that old argument became like much bigger, which was like, if you don't believe in the power of the data, you're stupid. You're going to be left behind. You don't know what's going on. And for me, it was like this sort of uncomfortable feeling. It really came out. I worked for Grantland for a while. Barry Zito had fallen off the rails, had signed what retroactively appeared one of the worst contracts ever for the Giants, where he went from lights out for the A's. I think he was 93-11 when the A's scored 3 runs. Like, he was dynamite. And then he fell off a cliff with the Giants. And I knew Barry well, and I argued that the contract itself had thrown him off, that the pressure from the biggest contract for a pitcher ever had blown him up. And I had this argument with this writer for Grantland who was a very stats guy. And he was like, that's just a stupid narrative argument. And I was like, but I think it's pretty valid. And he would make his argument was something about foul territory in Oakland versus San Francisco. And I'm like, well, that counts for like half his games, but it doesn't account he's terrible everywhere. Like what the, so that's when I really started to bristle at the idea that analytics were the answer to every question, and that narrative was never the answer to the question. Experience was never the answer.
I'm looking right now. It's 255 page fuck you to that guy at Grantland.
that guy Grantland. Yeah. Who actually turned out to not be a great dude, but yeah, it's also I briefly worked on a show for Netflix called Away that came out last year, and that was it actually did really well, and then Netflix, the algorithm decided it didn't do well enough and canceled it. So it's my fuck you to that, to Netflix, the Netflix algorithm as well.
Yeah, that makes sense. It does.
It's fuck you to a lot of people. I guess that's what I do.
There's a lot of fun in that. There's so much to discuss here, and honestly, David, I think so. David and I have known each other for roughly 100 years, during which time, he has been coaching basketball his whole adult life, and I was an early appreciator of the geekery of basketball, and we had like personal debate, which still goes on to this day, over like how the fuck does basketball actually work. And I think we're kind of like, I'm like, follow the GPS of your phone is very useful, and he's like, you're gonna drive off a cliff. Right? Like, are you getting that, David? This is a little bit, you and I are living in this thing that he is talking about. You agree?
Yeah, you're talking about me?
Yeah, I
think that, well, let's just boil it down for our listeners who are basketball fans, which we typically get, Chris. Just now,
I've heard of the sport. I don't want to protect it.
It's a round thing. We throw into peach baskets and a net. So the draft that just happened this last late summer, you all drafted a player at number 4 that almost universally was not considered a top 4 player based on metrics. Now, they're not all advanced metrics. Some of it was just he can't shoot well. That isn't any kind of, you don't need an algorithm to know that.
No, I didn't see that.
But what a lot of these guys do, and please understand that Henry and I consider as dear friends some of the godfathers of basketball analytics. They are brilliant and wonderful people, and we love them. And yet, when you are trying to project talent, as an example, you use your data that has every other player that ever looked like you and had similar stats to you in college and how they projected out of the NBA. And that helps inform your ultimate projection of where this player is going to be. I happen to be someone who thought Scotty Barnes was one of the top 2 players in the draft. That's who the Raptors drafted at number 4. Everyone around the country and here, anyway, thought it was a huge mistake. I'm now a very popular person on Toronto radio and podcast because he's become one of the top 2 players in. Now, I'm not spiking any balls and calling touchdown. It's been a month and a half. He looks like he's going to be a great player. He wouldn't be the first guy to start out great and then just flatten out, or other guys just explode. But as Henry, just right now, Chris, today, I'm writing an article where I'm just using my eyes. I'm trying not to use much data to explain what it is I'm seeing, what I've seen the last few days in the NBA. I do this once in a while. And Henry reminded me in a pretty sharp edit this morning, like, hey, I don't need you to look up stats. Anyone can do that. Sometimes they are a part of the story. You should tell it. But we're trying to get your eyes plugged in to our brains. So as someone who I don't know, I'm not great at math. I'm fine at it. But I need my eyes. And they're informed over, I've been playing basketball or coaching it since 1973 when I was 8 years old. So I can't wait to read this book. I haven't seen it yet, but I'm going to get it because
it'll speak to you. It'll speak to you. But that's, and you're the kind of person who, someone like, I'm going to sound like an old fart now, but like some 22-year-old will come out of school and go, oh, you don't know what you're talking about.
Oh, it happens all the time.
Yeah, and that makes me nuts. It makes me, that's like, no. Like your experience is valid. The data is also valid. Like for me, it's like I sometimes feel a bit sheepish about the book because the book is going to get cast as like the anti-Moneyball, and it's not that at all. Like I sometimes think statistics are a really interesting way of looking at things, but for me, they're not the only way of looking at things. And what you're talking about with Barnes, like there's something that happens with statistics where statistics are really good at making you a what. like you get put into a bucket by an algorithm.
Yeah.
Like so because you are similar to this person, I expect you to behave similarly. That I mean, not to put too fine a point, that's what racists do, for instance. Like racists make presumptions about you based on certain characteristics about yourself, their negative perception, and I expect you to do this because you are that. And for me, it's like, well, what about the who? How do you measure like someone like what you're talking about, like where it's like whose gifts are not readily apparent statistically, and yet has a real valid presence as a player, and it's only because you can see it. And so for me, that's one of the underlying problems with algorithms, with AI, with statistics, is that it puts us into buckets like preemptively. It decides who we are without really taking the time to know us. And there's something like
they lack context.
Yeah,
they lack context too often. Go ahead.
Do you know who David Rothschild is?
No.
He's a super brilliant, like, forecaster of things. He's one of these people who, tells you about the election before the election and that kind of thing. He's he works at, I'm pretty sure he still works at Microsoft Research. And he helped us with this project at ESPN where which is called Espn Forecast, where we would basically, based on all kinds of data science, we like assembled a panel of 250 people who watch basketball really closely. And we would like poll them on like who's going to make the playoffs. But David was there to help us organize the questions in a way that like the panel would actually be super useful, right? If you ask the question the right way, then like there's this, you've probably seen this. There's a famous book about the wisdom of crowds by the guy from the New Yorker, James Surowiecki. Basically, like sometimes the crowd knows something that the individuals in the crowd don't know. So we're trying to capture that, and it worked super duper well. But to your point, he was like, look, there are some questions where there's no way you could know. And in those moments, like the snap judgment of someone who's just been watching it their whole life, like this is the detective who has a hunch or whatever, like when you actually just don't have the data, inputs are wrong, right? Like Scotty Barnes in the NBA, there's no input for that. You know what I mean? Like he's never been in the NBA.
Right.
Like, and so data is the wrong tool in that moment, I guess.
Yeah, it happens. You see it happen all the time where ideally you would sit down and analyze, and you would have time to sort of reflect and look at different blah, blah, blah. Sometimes you have to make a decision quickly. And the data, that's where experience comes in. So, an example is the response to COVID-19. Like you didn't have time to figure out what was going on there. Like you had to make a snap judgment on this is bad and we need to do something about it. Or any kind of medical station in an emergency room. They're not sitting there with spreadsheets. They're going like, well, I think this is this, and we're going to do our best with it. And so for me, that sort of, there's such a value in people who know shit. Like it's like there's just a sense in some people based on experience. There's this great article in the New Yorker about a carpenter named Mark Ellison, who could do things with a table saw that you're not really allowed to do with the table saw. And he would do it with like not paying attention. Burkhard Bilger wrote this story about this carpenter. And the way he described it, he called it embodied analysis. When you just sort of intuitively know, when you get into that flow state, and he compared it to Roberto Clemente chasing down a fly ball. Like Roberto Clemente would turn his back to the ball. Someone would hit it, he would look at it, he would turn his back, he would run, he would turn around and catch the ball. And it's like,
I didn't know that. Wow.
That's how he watched the ball. He knew where it was. And so his term for that was embodied analysis, which it's like muscle memory. It's like and I really love that idea that some people just are so experienced, have seen so much that intuitively, not intuitively, it's like built into them.
Yeah.
To know what they're seeing. So Scotty Barnes, that's a fantastic, this is what's going to happen, by the way. I finished the book. I know I'm going to hear tons of stories that will be helpful to them. So Scotty Barnes is a great example of like a guy who would have been overlooked if you've just seen the spreadsheet, but it took someone to go, oh, that guy. I like that guy.
Yeah. And well, and to your point, I watched every one of his college games because my son's on the team. So I had a little bit of, I would say, a very unfair advantage. I wasn't watching just clips. I watched everything to include when there was a timeout because I wanted to see my son on the bench. He was a redshirt freshman last year. I soaked in 100% of the Scotty Barnes experience. I had a big advantage over.
Well, he also, David has a David, loves a lot of things about players that he weights more than others. being the sunniest motherfucker in the world and just like cheering like crazy is one of David's like trigger points. And like Scotty Barnes is like A+ on one of David's favorite tests, right? Like
Who wants a bad guy in the room? That
Yeah.
counts.
Right.
But how do you make? There's a great example. By the way, David, you said unfair advantage. You had an earned advantage.
Yeah, true. Yeah.
You put the time in. That's
Yeah.
just it wasn't an unfair advantage.
Yeah.
You watched, and there was a value to that. The good guy in a room, like that counts. That matters. Who wants to work with an asshole? It's like so for me, that's a great example of something where that has a value. It's very hard to quantify, but it's worth something. And you only see that by watching.
Well, and that's something data can't cover.
At all.
You know, it can only see the end result over time. It can see the end result over time.
Yeah.
Is there a sunniness quotient, Henry, that you're going to argue for? Is there
Well,
a good guy
you can be
stat?
great in college and not be that because you're just so talented. You can't factor in that kind of personality. College is it's too easy of a game for some of these players.
Right.
The next level can expose you for sure. And I see Henry. I know Henry's reaction on the NBA level. You can value it more because it just grinds you down if you aren't that kind of player.
I made that sort of whiny noise because
hard to quantify, but we've all heard it and we know exactly what you're talking
well, you
about.
know that we were all here because that you can't quantify it phrase is like 95% of the time it's used by an idiot who doesn't want to do the work, right?
Yes.
And they don't want stats to be important, and they want the world to be your guy from the beginning of the story walking around in his underwear who's just the lord of baseball, right? Like they just want that reality be damned, and they want to be able to drive a car that guzzles as much gas as they want, and they won't want to wear a mask in the coat. They just don't want to react to information, right? They want to be lord of the manor, right? And yeah, I guess there are probably some things that we can't measure, but the fact is, like, if you are like, let's say you're the surgeon who builds the team with non-assholes, sunny people, and it makes a difference over time, you're going to have better surgery outcomes, right? Like it might not be directly attributable to sunny attitudes, but like it is super measurable, right? Like there's the stats that we look at like to project forward from, but like epidemiological type stats, like if your stuff works, like it's in them. Like plus minus stats or championships, like if being a good teammate makes you a better champion, then you'll have a championship, right? Like, and you'll see it.
Totally agree. And I don't think anything surpasses stats when it comes to figuring out what happened when.
Yeah.
Like what stats reveal things about, like you're saying, did the vaccine have an effect? Well, clearly it did.
Yeah.
I think sometimes where we run into sort of debate is the why. So the stats will reveal what happened. I can see that happened. Now, why did that happen?
Right.
And that becomes that's like the Barry Zito argument. Why did Barry Zito fall off a cliff? I don't know that stats can reveal that answer.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you're saying like my team is performing better. Well, now why? Like statistically, I can see that we're winning. I can see that our expert shooting percentage has gone up, blah, blah, blah. But why did that happen? And then the sunniness or then observation, David watching, that's when that comes in. I think the why is the hard part for us to agree on.
This is where I'm going to take this conversation completely off the rails.
Let's do it.
When I was newly at ESPN.com, you'd see the traffic data. Which was a new thing in journalism, right? No one knew in a magazine. Here to tell you, I'm sure like no one really knows which is the popular story in the magazine or the popular issue of the magazine, right? Like if it's sunny the day they put it on the newsstand, people buy more, etc. This photography, whatever. And then later we go to meetings where they're like, oh, that was a really great story because like made up answer is given here, right? like no one really knows. But online, like I went to NYU journalism school and did the things they told us were what you're supposed to do, like the hard-hitting investigation of the famous player or whatever. And it was like, then I wrote a story about how NBA players love the Cheesecake Factory and huge. And I'm like, well, what the hell are we doing here? That started like a decade of looking at all the data. I'm like, what is popular? Like, what do people like? Ended up with some theories really stolen largely from Ira Glass, who has a very fine view of this and talks about it all the time in ways that I just like lifted. And we made a little team with 8 writers and 4 editors and like just used like, I'm trying to do what you're describing. Like, I'm trying to like reverse engineer the success, the why, right?
Why?
And we slaughtered all the traffic records with stuff that is in that Hourglass knows, right? Just basically, we're looking for these kind of characters in struggle and the 3 acts that Shakespeare knew about, et cetera, right? All the stuff that you do for a living. And it was just like, oh, people don't care about basketball. Like, people care about people and people in struggle. And like, I don't know. Anyway, I don't pretend to be an expert in this, but I know that like the reverse engineering project is fraught with trouble, very vague and full of guesswork and a lot of the eye test kind of stuff. But it's in there, right? There's stuff in there if you know what you're looking for.
Yeah. I mean, I think, a lot of this stuff, how to be popular is a really good question. I mean, that comes up in so many industries. And by the way, what you're talking about with like the statistics for our readership, like I remember when Esquire got the TV with the put it up in the wall, because for years I worked just believing that everyone read my stories and loved them. And
it's true. Who could argue with that?
Right. I was just like, well, clearly they did. They bought the magazine. They must have loved my story.
They loved it. Yeah.
And then, the TV arrived and it would show exactly where people stopped reading. They'd be like, this paragraph is where you lost 40%. You're like, whoa, well, this is debilitating. This is knowledge that it's not going to help me at all.
Yeah.
But how to be popular is a great sort of debate constantly. The movie industry, this is the great debate right now because movies are so expensive to make. And this is why we're getting 55 comic book movies and nothing else. It's because, well, there's an IP. It always has to be based on previous property now. If you're going to invest $100 million in a movie, you got to know you're going to make at least $400 million break even after marketing and blah, blah, blah. We're going to force feed this stuff to people. And eventually it's going to peter out. Eventually these movies are going to come out and people are going to be like, because you've had enough. It's like there is a saturation point. So how to be popular is one of the great debates in every music. Music for me is like the most mystical. Like why some song is a hit and some other song that seems equally good is not. Like I don't know what happened there. And those for me are like super interesting questions.
Yeah, that's
Player in the Cheesecake Factory. That makes perfect sense to me.
Talk me through that.
Well, because people want to know about their favorite athletes. They want to know like who they are as people.
Yeah.
Baxter Holmes wrote this story about peanut butter and jelly sandwiches.
I assigned that story.
Oh, okay. There you go.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
You're barking up the right tree there, Chris.
Great story. And it was massive, right?
It was, yeah.
And the best thing about it is Baxter now has a James Beard Award for like culinary.
Yes, he'll let you know that too. That's right in his Twitter bio. Yeah.
Have you gone out to a restaurant in Los Angeles with Baxter Holmes?
We have.
And what happens? People come out of the
mind.
kitchens and people deliver food and you got all sorts of free treats. And it's like,
one of the last outings I made before the pandemic, Baxter took me to like a wine dinner in New York and like that, people flew in. Yeah. It's bananas. Yeah.
And it's because he wrote a basketball. This is great that he's a James Beard Award winner. He's a what? Why is he a James Beard Award winner? Because he wrote a story about peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. Now, if they knew that, he would not be getting the lobster bisque from whatever delivered out of the kitchen. It's like it's an interesting. But yeah, people want to know who these guys are.
They do, but I think I would add there's one other element, which is
everybody loves the Cheesecake Factory.
So Baxter wrote an unbelievable story about Greg Popovich's fancy dinner. Right?
Yes. Oh my God.
Loved it. That's tremendously insightful into the secret world of the NBA. Not nearly as popular, I think, because of what you just said. Like, people don't get to do that. They don't know that. That's not about them, right? But they know fucking peanut butter and jelly. And that story had like Russell Westbrook likes it with the crust cut off and strawberry jam, and Anthony Davis. Or they had like, basically you get to put yourself on the peanut butter and jelly scale. And same with most of the popular stories, I think, have some way to include the audience, right? Cheesecake Factory is a restaurant where you can go, right?
Oh my God, when I was on the baseball beat, I thought I went to Chicago for the first time, and there was a cheesecake. The hotel was the Westin. You stayed with the players, and there's a Cheesecake Factory across from it. And I thought I discovered this like quaint little eatery.
Yeah, you did, yeah.
It's like Chicago. It's like going to New York and thinking the Sbarro was like the
original Ray's famous pizza. Yeah.
But at the time I was like, oh, look at that. I was like, oh, what a diverse menu. And blah, blah. I thought I discovered like, this is how stupid I am. So that's this asterisk on this entire conversation is I thought the Cheesecake Factory was both a one-off and fancy. I thought it was very fancy.
Yeah, it's great though. I mean, I had a friend who worked for the Knicks for a while, and he was a disgruntled employee, and he sent me this like sort of
at the Knicks.
Yeah, I know. He sent me a shitty, like it was the kind of picture you take when you don't want people to know you're taking a picture. So it's like half got his jacket or whatever, you know, blurry, but it's a picture of a stack of Cheesecake Factory boxes from, you know, like 10 feet high, like to-go boxes. And he's like, this is the Knicks like nutrition strategy for our weekend trip to London. And they like didn't trust England to supply fucking food.
So funny.
Not wrong. Not wrong. English cuisine is not. Yeah, no, that was probably great. Import a bunch of Cheesecake Factory.
Yeah. Okay, I just want to force you to tell us your Connor McGregor story from your book, The Eye Test.
Yeah,
which is amazing. Do you mind regaling us with such a tale?
No. So Connor McGregor. So this is kind of related to the eye test in the sense that I randomly, I used to be a pretty big boxing guy. I was not a huge UFC guy. And I randomly watched a Connor McGregor fight. This is a while, like he was not yet a star. And I was like, who's this guy? Because I loved his fighting style because it was so old. It was like Irish, like he would like, you know, he was in a Donnybrook. You know what I mean? He was like sort of like, and I was like, oh, I'm interested in this guy. He doesn't look like he's fighting. He's engaged in a brouhaha. You know what I mean? I was like, I like that.
Put up your dukes kind of thing.
Yeah, put up your dukes. I was like, where's his monocle? And one of the great things about Esquire is you could pitch Esquire didn't have a world. It was just like stories. So I said to my editor, I was like, I kind of want to get to know this guy. And he was like, yeah, okay. You know, and so I hung out with Connor. It was his first time hanging out with a journalist from a magazine, and it was the first time the UFC allowed him without a handler. It was like this because Esquire wouldn't agree to, you know, we were big enough where we were like, UFC is like, well, he's gonna have a guy with him, and I was like, well, no, he's not actually. If you want the story, and they wanted the story, blah blah blah. So we were wandering around the streets of New York, and Connor had no idea what I was doing, and I really didn't know him very well. And he was just such an interesting, intense personality because he didn't believe in any of the things I believed in. You know, he didn't believe in clocks. He didn't believe in time. And I'm a very punctual person. He didn't believe, he was walking down the middle of roads in Manhattan. And I was like, Connor, there's sidewalks. And he's like, well, I didn't agree to that. Like, I'm going to walk here. And I was like, well, we have all kind of agreed. It's called society. We've all kind of agreed that the cars go here and the people go here. He's like, well, I never signed that contract. I'm like, okay. He bought these $1,700 sneakers, ugly ass sneakers that he immediately walked through slushy puddles in. And I was like, no, you can't, you know, I was like, you can't do that. And he was like, well, why can't I do this? And I'm like, okay. He doesn't believe in death. He was like, well, I don't think I'm going to die. And I was like, well, death is a statistical, that's a certainty. And he was like, well, I'm not. I was like, okay. So it's just this cat who was like super, and it made me start thinking about like, well, maybe I do subscribe to too many like laws. Like maybe the rules of the world I sort of have accepted as fact, and maybe they're not fact. And at the time, you know, because I had boxed, but I'd never, you know, submissions weren't part of my fighting repertoire. Right. And I was always like, whenever you see someone choked out, I was always like, I think I can not pass out. I'm sure I could get out of this situation. Not get out of it. I would just choose not to go to sleep. And Connor was like, okay. And we were in the photo studio at the time, and he was in his underwear. He climbs on my back, puts me into a rear naked choke. So he's got one arm here, one arm behind, and he just starts to squeeze. And I can't even begin to tell you how unpleasant that sensation. And when it made me realize, like, it took seconds. I was doing every breathing exercise. I was resisting. I immediately, for some reason, I got very distracted by the fact that his heel was in my groin.
For some reason, yeah.
Yeah. So I'm like grabbing his foot, which is like the least successful place to grab. And I'm like there's pictures of the incident. I am grabbing his foot as he's choking me. And of course I passed out. Of course I did. And there was no rational part of me that was like, it was the suggestion that you don't have to believe all the things that we're taught. And then it made me realize, well, sometimes reality is just reality. like whatever magical thinking you want will just slap you in the forehead. And if a very skilled MMA fighter wants to choke you out, you will pass out.
You're sleeping.
There's like a little artery that carries the blood to your brain, and he's got his
and it's a very odd sensation. I wish I could describe it better. It's that you're not choking. You can breathe, but you're passing out. And it's I gotta tell you, I was off the rest of the day. I felt funny. Like
you might as well have gotten a quick colonoscopy.
Could have easily done it. I wouldn't have had any idea. I would have had no idea what was going on. You know, and it's like it was just such a funny, weird, like he basically suggested me into it. He's like, I don't believe in this, I don't believe in that. And I was like, oh, well, I'm not gonna believe in that. And he's like, well, I'm gonna tell you the truth about that. It was a great day, really. He Dana White screamed at me over that story. He was very upset about a quote in it. But otherwise, that story, I don't know if anyone read it.
What was Dana White upset about?
I had said to him, he had bought Connor McGregor really cheap. Going back to the eye test, he just liked Connor McGregor. There was no like, Connor McGregor was a pretty small, he used to be a plumber. Like he was a pretty small scale, late blooming guy, and Dana White just liked him, signed him to a contract for cheap. And then he became like the biggest star in the UFC. Yeah. And I said to Dana, I was like, God, it must have been like buying a penny stock and watching it go whatever. And he goes, yeah, it's like buying a penny stock and watching it go blah, 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 which I put in. He was very mad that I had, he didn't want to be seen referencing Connor as a penny stock.
Yeah.
But I had suggested it and he had said it back. And he was like, I didn't say that. And I was like, well, I got it on tape. Like you said it. But it was very, boy, did he get mad.
That's the Warriors owner, Joe Lacob, at one point kind of bragged a little bit about how little they paid Steph Curry because he signed one of his deals when he was injured. And he didn't realize that Steph was standing in the back of the room when he said it. And like it was almost a huge, it was same deal.
Sometimes those moments cost you so much money.
Yeah.
Like, because then the guy gets mad. ESPN will be bad at me for this, but I covered the World Cup the Soccer World Cup in 2010 for them in South Africa. Flight was Atlanta to Johannesburg, which at the time was the longest commercial flight you could take. It was 17 hours long.
Wow.
And I had a middle seat and coach. I can do anything. I'm bulletproof at this point. And I walk on and a bunch of my colleagues are in business class. And I'm like, what? My boss said, well, you didn't ask. And I was like, well, guess what's happening from now on?
Wow.
You just cost yourself a whole lot of money.
Right.
Same thing.
Yeah.
Wow.
Oh my God, that flight was so terrible.
So to your point, Conor McGregor's belief system can like rearrange your reality, right? Like,
but only to a point.
Up to a point.
And then reality is reality.
Right.
It's just like I wondered afterwards if it had all been one great big con to choke me out. I wonder if his goal when he woke up was like, I'm gonna choke this guy out. I gotta get him to agree to have me on his back. How do I do that? And then it might have been a very elaborate setup.
I hope he's that sophisticated in his journalist manipulation.
It would be amazing.
Do you by any chance have you heard the This American Life story about the couple that believes in 6 imaginary birds that live with them? Do you know? Is this ringing bells? No.
I feel like you're just playing Mad Libs now.
Okay. It's pretty new. It's maybe my favorite. Well, I just heard it, so to me, it's my favorite. It'll probably be replaced. But this story right here, Judy just put the thing up. So this couple like just makes up like I talk for my dog. I like will report to my wife things that my dog said. Of course, that's all imagined, right?
It's not imaginary. That's real.
That's real. So this couple has a fancy version of that, where the birds are trying to throw a party, but it gets canceled the night before because they didn't really talk to Beyonce's publicist like they said they did, or the birds like went to see the brother had built a boat and the birds thought it was going to be like the boat on Succession, but it was a total disappointment because it was only like 20 feet long. Like this kind of stuff. The birds are part of the family narrative. I want you to listen to it because it's just
okay.
Sean Cole's a master, and like the story's beautiful and it's touching and it's got a lot of love in it. But the birds end up pissing off their daughter, who's like, I would come home and say, I got an A on a test. And she was like, but somehow like the bird's got an A++, or maybe the bird's got an F, and like that's more interesting than my A. And she was like legit jealous of these imaginary birds, right? So then I wrote down a little quote here, inspired by your Connor McGregor story. But Sean Cole is basically like, it's almost like the birds are real. And then this daughter, who's now an adult, says, I mean, what is real other than what everyone around you says is real, right? I mean, if everyone around you is talking about them and they're having significant social, emotional, and psychological impact on your life, I don't see what's realer than that.
Yeah. Wow. I'm not high enough for that. First thing in the morning. I didn't wake and bake.
It's Conor McGregor in you right there. That's what's happening.
That's crazy. Wow. I'm going to all sorts of places where I'm like, I think I would have murdered my parents.
Oh,
that's where I'm going with this.
Yeah.
Like if I came back with an A and they said, "Oh, Barney the bird got an A+," I'd be like, "Well, sleep with one eye open tonight, Dad." Seems like that's, but that is, I mean, to take that to a sort of serious, that happens. We see that constantly, where people imagine their own. You put, like the people who don't believe in mass and stuff, like the Lords of the Manor thing that you said earlier, where people manufacture their own reality.
Yeah.
And then it becomes real. Then it becomes like that's how they live. And that's a scary thing sometimes. Like and I don't want to take this to a serious place, but like the sort of disagreement over what is a fact. It's like a super dangerous. Like when we can't agree, like, well, what can we debate when we can't agree on the baseline facts of a situation? And that happens. This is another problem I have. I explore social media's influence in the eye test and the use of algorithms that feed us more of what we already believe. And so then you end up almost with a cult-like feeling about your beliefs, and you think anyone who doesn't believe those things is insane. And that's algorithms. That's being fed. That's the danger of AI.
You sound like you know a lot of Americans.
A Canadian. I'm exposing Canadian secrets here. This is like a magician talking about.
It's a safe place, Chris.
One of our when I was so I have a master's degree in urban planning for no good reason.
That seems obvious. Yeah.
Yeah. One of the things we did, well, I like Lego, and I thought it's not like Lego. And one of the things we would do is go down sort of late 90s, and we would go down to Windsor and watch Detroit burn on Devil's Night. And we'd go, and it was a great way to sort of watch like what an apocalypse looks like. It was the only place where I had seen a Burger King abandoned to squatters. It was like, and for us Canadians watch America, like that's one of our sports. There's like, we just stand there by the border and we just watch and we go, oh, we don't want that. We'll take some things. We're like, oh, that looks good. We'll take that. Mm-hmm. We briefly had Olive Garden, which was like a beautiful time in Canadian.
I was thinking Dairy Queen. I thought maybe you took Dairy Queen.
We took Dairy Queen. Yeah. The one I want to take really badly that we don't have is Jimmy John's. I would like to take some.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, so it's watching America is a sport for us, and increasingly like a terrifying sport. Yeah.
Well, you're welcome.
Yeah, I wish you guys the best.
Glad we can entertain you guys.
People are always like, "Why are Canadians so smug?" And I'm like, "Well, it's because we live next to it. It's like
right.
Feeling pretty good about ourselves."
But you did you make a point that Canadians are more violent and aggro than you let on. Like you're polite, but not necessarily pacifist, and you can prove that with a story from the airport.
I can. Wow, you actually segued that.
I did that, right? You see what I did there?
You did that.
That is first rodeo.
That
is a while.
Impressive. Can we quantify that ability to segue? I don't think we can. I think that's just a magic that just happened from experience. Thank you, Henry, for coming to the side of us. So it's a myth that Canadians are nice. That is absolutely a myth. Americans are nicer. Canadians are polite.
Yeah.
And this is a very crucial distinction, because what happens here all the time is people assume that we're like super passive. And Canadians are not passive at all. It's a really weird idea, I think. And it's like how koalas have the greatest marketing of any species on Earth. People are like, oh, koalas are adorable and cuddly. They're so soft. Koalas will kill you and everyone you care about. Koalas are terrifying creatures. They have super long claws. They scream like banshees. When they get wet, you can see what they truly are. Google wet koala and you'll see what I'm talking about.
Do they pop new ones out of their bodies like a damn gremlin?
They're like gremlins. They are evil creatures. And people are like, oh, they're the best. They're the best. I'm like, no, I lived in Australia. They will kill you. They're terrifying. They
really will kill you.
Well, if they got a hold of you, they would really.
There is some.
What are we doing now? What are we doing
now?
Oh, now not so cuddly. Exactly like a gremlin. Don't open. They're terrifying creatures.
So this is a preamble to a Canada story.
Canadians are wet koalas. Canadians are, and so we to illustrate. So I grew up in a small town. There's an amazing TV show that probably hasn't translated to the States called Letterkenny, which is like about small town Ontario.
I've seen a little bit of that. Yeah.
It's so on the nose. Like I watch it and I go, oh, there's my youth.
Wow.
And we settled things by fighting. It was how you settled arguments. And then you were friends. But and the fights would particularly happen when someone had violated the social contract. Mm-hmm. So this is what I mean by polite. Canadians will follow rules, but as soon as you don't follow the rules, you're gonna get filled in, and it's probably going to be physically
filled in
because we can fight without. There's no guns, right? I would never practice this in America because someone's going to shoot me.
Right.
But here, a Donnybrook is like part of the nightly fabric. It's because someone did something wrong. Mm-hmm. In my case, I was wearing a T-shirt. I was flying home from Los Angeles. I was wearing a T-shirt. Oh, there we go. I tell these stories on Twitter like a moron.
No, they're great. I love them.
Super accidental, by the way. No popularity intention here. Was mortified when these things started really catching on. Like, was terrified. One of them got read by 10 million people, which is probably the biggest audience I've had for anything. And I was like, I'm just a man sitting here in my underwear. Like, I shouldn't be allowed that audience. There's something wrong.
You like the algorithm that day?
I didn't. No, too big, too much. I was like, no. This is wrong. No, I should not have that audience. No, this is part of the problem. I believe in gatekeepers. There should be some gatekeeping going on.
Yeah.
I was wearing a T-shirt with the logo of the CBC, which is our national network. It's kind of like PBS, but it's sort of like more important. It's a very Canadian institution, and I'm a big believer in the CBC. Have my T-shirt on. I was flying an Air Canada flight to Toronto. We had an emergency landing, and it was like an announced, terrifying. Like we had to fly over Lake Ontario and empty all the fuel before we landed in case we exploded, basically. So I had about 20 minutes of like actually pretty genuine terror. Like I wrote notes to my children. We land, everything's fine. Pilot did a great job. We leave the plane, we go to customs, and it's jammed. There's like 1,000 people in customs, and we don't get any special. Never mind that we just thought we were going to die and that we're like 2 hours late and fire trucks carried us off the plane. We're now just in the customs line. And the guy in front of me, there's like this 50-year-old guy in front of me with his wife and his 2 adult children who just keeps looking at me. And I could tell he wanted to say something. And I can't even describe to you how hard I was beaming, like the don't talk to me.
Yeah.
I'm not here for you. Mm-hmm. You don't want this.
Mm-hmm.
You guys wouldn't have said a thing to me. You would have turned around and been really uncomfortable, probably. I was radiating malice. Mm-hmm. And he goes, so you're a fan of the Communist Broadcasting Corporation?
Jeez. And
I was just like,
let's go.
And I'd had it. And he'd violated the social contract. And so I was like, I don't know how much language you want me to say here, but I was like,
all of it. Yeah.
I was like, go fuck yourself. And if you keep talking to me, I'm going to fucking take you back. Like, that's how this is going to end. And one of the adult daughters immediately burst into tears and was like, I'm never traveling with you again. And I was like, does this guy do this all the time? Like, he just attacks people wearing like public broadcasting. Like, is this what he does? Like, and the wife is pulling him away, and he's like, I will stand up for freedom and democracy. And I'm just like, oh, you fucking idiot. And And it was one of the greatest moments of my life, actually, and I wish it was recorded. He goes, I should have worn my CSI t-shirt because I can't stand idiots. And I said, actually, you should have worn a t-shirt with pockets so you have someone to put your fucking teeth when I knock them out.
That's the best line. Oh my god.
And I was like,
how did you think of that in real time? That's fucking perfect.
That's good. Yeah.
So one of the things I was taught, this is embodied analysis. In one of the things I was taught a long time ago, was make your physical threats extremely specific. They become much more real. You don't go, I'm going to beat the shit out of you. That doesn't mean anything.
Yeah.
If you say, I'm going to throw you out that window with velocity, people are like, oh, he might actually throw me out that window.
He's thought about this. Yeah.
He's thought about this. He's planned this out, and he's probably done this before. It's an interesting, be very specific in your threats. And so I was very specific. I was like, you're going to put your teeth in your pocket. Blah, blah, blah.
That's awesome.
It was, and then the younger daughter is like, please stop talking to my dad. And I was like, your dad needs to shut the fuck up. Like, your dad needs to stop talking to strangers in the middle of airports about their t-shirts. Like,
who almost died in a crash.
Almost died in a crash. Now, he didn't know that, but I would say anyone with any remote perceptive capabilities would have known I was in no mood. And then, of course, the most painful part of the whole exercise is because it's customs. The line does this, so every corner, and I'm just like, like 2 inches from this guy. There was these college kids behind me coming back from Barbados or something, and one of them goes, you know, if this was behind us, I'd be all for it, but it's in front of us and they're going to keep us as witnesses. And it became this whole dynamic kind of thing. And then we get up to customs at the same time, next to each other. And my guy goes, anything to declare? And I go, yeah, that guy's a fucking asshole. And his wife turns around and nods. She's like, yeah, he is.
Oh my God.
I think that family is broken up over his defense of freedom and democracy.
Oh my God. They were in real trouble.
I was enraged. But that is Canada. So everything's fine until you violate a social contract. And our social contracts are extremely specific. Probably the biggest one I can think of is line jumping. If you jump a line here, you will die.
Then my wife's got some Canadian blood, because we saw my daughter at a college parent weekend a month ago, 2 months ago. And my wife, we all stood in line as if we were college kids again, and to get in this one club, and kids are just cutting in line, and all the other kids, we were with a bunch of girls with my daughter's friends, they were fine with it. And my wife was like, I'm gonna have to shank somebody.
Yeah, she should have.
She's never been anything, but I'm telling you, she did not take it. I said, honey, we don't travel to some other places because there's plenty of things that cut in line all the time. I guess
my girlfriend's Romanian.
In Europe they do it all the time.
Well, it leads to all these obvious jokes that I bought her off the internet, but I did not. She's here of her own free will. But one of the things that we go to Romania, and lines are not a thing there. Yeah, the crowds just mashing through a door. Crazy. Yeah, and I'm just like, what? She's like, you can't take those rules and apply them here. Like, the standards are different. In Canada, I say this with warmth. If you come to Toronto, you will have a lovely time. The restaurants are very good. The Raptors are good to watch. The city is very clean and friendly. But if you cut a line, you're not going to make it home. Your teeth are going to be in your pocket. Yeah, it's just not going to work out for you. Well, so you guys did invent hockey. Like, this isn't a surprise. Hockey is how hockey's government is based on the idea that if you mess around, you're going to find out. That's the whole rule of hockey. Is like that's how we governed ourselves. It was. I don't understand that. Can you explain that to me? I don't know anything about hockey. Well, hockey had this. It's not so much anymore. But every hockey team when I was growing up would have like an enforcer, right? A guy who was strictly there to fight. My favorite enforcer of all time was a guy named Dave Cementhead Semenko, who played for the Edmonton Oilers when Wayne Gretzky was with the Oilers. Yeah. So Dave's role was if anyone messed with Wayne. And Dave would come out and you would be violated on the ice, and then you would not mess with Wayne. It was like a system in place, kind of barbaric, but also really effective. Like, Wayne Gretzky hardly ever got body checked because Dave Semenko would come in and absolutely convince you that you had made a mistake. And that's how we govern ourselves as like small town kids. And that's how I still go to the bar. Like, you can't, if you mess around, you're going to find out in Canada. But so if you behave, everything's going to be okay. That's where the nice comes in. Yeah. Polite, not nice.
Yeah, the polite thing, as you describe it to me, I'm getting there's like a seething. Canada's seething a little more than I guess I appreciated from afar.
Yeah, it's
cold
got a
up
bit.
there. It's cold.
It's cold. No, it's got a bit of that Japanese, like the suppressed Japanese, like
Yeah.
you know, that like little weird, like, and it comes out in weird ways. In Japan, it
Yeah.
comes out in like weird sex clubs, and in Canada, it comes out with like street fights. But it's like,
teeth jarring street fights, and then a pint, and then a beer.
but then yeah, and then buds afterwards. If it's a good,
Yeah.
you'll see that in hockey all the time too, where two guys fight and then they're like, oh, good one, like way to go.
I live in Clearwater, Florida, Chris, and there is Air Canada's been flying here for as long as I've been alive.
Oh,
we get Canadians coming
it's
to
half
Florida
Canadian,
beaches
isn't it,
all
right
the
now?
time.
Yeah, it's half Canadian. My parents are down there right now. They go is that they're like, my parents call basically every day from Florida, and they go, you wouldn't know there's a pandemic. We're just walking around.
Well, except for the 60,000 dead, you're right.
Except for the dead, but they're like, you wouldn't.
Yeah.
You would,
But we're, you know, yeah.
too. But up here, we're still very rule abiding. This is the thing. None of that mask wearing stuff happens up here. If you go in not wearing a mask where you're supposed to wear a mask, you'll get called out.
Oh, I love that.
That's Canada too. Yeah.
Like what would be the phraseology that would be deployed there?
Put a fucking mask on, motherfucker.
Put a fucking mask on.
Out.
Put a fucking mask on. Oh, you would ask nicely at first. Hey, maybe you forgot your mask.
Yeah,
And
that
then-
sounds right.
And then someone will go, and then if someone goes, oh yeah, shit, I did forget my mask, then all good. I'm not wearing a stupid mask. Well, now you're gonna die.
Now you're being a jackass.
It'll open with sort of a passive aggressive. Oh, perhaps you're not aware of the rules. That's how
Oh wow.
Yeah.
I'm gonna give you an
Yeah.
out. Yeah.
So
I
remember-
make Canada sound very bad. It's nice up here.
No. I feel like this is clear. This is clear.
You just,
This
you just have to follow the rules. That's all.
doesn't seem like rocket science. Why can't we just follow the rules? Yeah.
And there is a lot of rules, and many of them are unspoken. It's got a sort of baseball thing to it.
Yeah.
But you'll figure them out. That's
I'm
not threatening.
I'm trying so hard to reintroduce the part of my brain that can segue, but like we probably should close with a mention of your book. Can we connect the wet koala to your book in any way that you can think of? Anyone? Anyone?
Well, yeah. So what I just explained to you is based on experience.
Yeah.
The book is basically at root. I mean, it's 288 pages as I'm reading on the long-winded guy wrote that shit. But it's really a defense of experience. And not that dumb, blind Lord of the Manor stuff that you're talking about. Statistics have dispelled many myths, and they should have died. Like that, those myths were bad and wrong. But there is still a value to like knowing things. I still believe in the power of experience and knowledge and wisdom and all those good things. So what I explained to you about Canada, like that's from living here for 40 years. Like that's something that I just hate to see people dismissed. Jalen Rose, I'll bring it back to basketball.
Beautiful.
Jalen Rose has a great defense about this, where he's like, some 20-year-old who's never played can now tell me that I don't know what I'm doing, or I don't know the game. And it's like insulting. He also thinks there's like a racialized component to it, like where it's like, we're dismissing the experience of Black players who are the predominant majority in the game.
The Sloan Conference is pretty white.
Exactly. And so he that idea that someone like who has played as long as he has and as successfully as he has, who has watched as much basketball as he has, like David, watching basketball his whole life and coaching and playing, like that counts. And I don't want people to think, I think a lot of people feel like a little sheepish about their experience, or if they don't 100% subscribe to every analytical thought, that they are the dumb one. And my book is, no, you actually have a lot of value. It's just, why would you look at anything in one particular way?
Yeah. Well, to your great point about emergency rooms, doctors are inundated with all the research when they read the journal and when they go to medical school, but not the night of the triage, right? When the people are rolling in bleeding, then we got to have that already built in, right?
Great Mike Tyson quote: everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly.
Canada for you.
No, Canada there is a plan, and if you violate it, we're going to punch you in the face.
Yeah, that's actually totally in the plan. Chris, thank you very much.
Of your next book.
Yeah, exactly.
everybody go buy the book. I guess David's going to be first.
Yes.
That's a little.
I just
David,
friended you
this-
on face. I just friended you on Twitter too, Chris.
Oh, thank you. This will
Um,
speak to you, Dave. I guarantee this
I'm
will
excited.
speak. This will
Yeah.
speak to you. All
I'm
right.
excited.
Thanks so much for having me.
All
This is
right,
my
thank
first
you.
book pitch.
Stay
It was
warm.
nice.